Humans in the grim darkness of the far future might not be as tall as towering xenos or gargantuan war machines, but that doesn't mean there aren't a few surprises lurking in the Imperium. Some might have a few mutations here and there, and others may have questionable augmentations, but they're all under that human umbrella. So let's jump right into it and see who makes the cut, beginning from the smallest and moving up to the giant of giants. At number 20 are the ratlings. These little marksmen are basically the smallest recognized strain of abhuman that still serves the Imperium in an official capacity. Ratlings stand at around 3.5 to 4 feet tall, and they make up for their tiny frames with some of the best sharpshooting and sniping skills in the galaxy. Ratlings love their comforts, especially good food and drink, but once they're in the field, they can hide, scout, and pick off key targets, all while being nearly invisible to the average soldier. They also bring a certain mischievous charm to the dour halls of the Astra Militarum, which can be entertaining so long as you keep an eye on your supplies. Moving on to number 19, the squats. Also called the demiurge by some, they are a stocky and hardy group often considered the dwarves of the Warhammer 40K universe. Squats are generally around 4 feet in height, and they make up for their limited stature with a deep love of technology, exceptional craftsmanship, and a stubborn toughness that's pretty legendary. They used to be far more numerous, but were nearly wiped out or simply receded into the corners of the galaxy. These days, they pop up in the form of the Leagues of Votan. They can heft gear that ordinary humans might struggle with, and they're masters of forging armor, weapons, and other machines of war. At number 18 is the average human. Yes, that might seem a little humdrum, but it's important to remember that people in the Imperium clock in around 5 to 6 feet tall. Evolution in 40K might have introduced a bunch of side branches and abhuman offshoots, but your basic citizen living on a hive world, agri world, or even a slightly nicer civilized planet tends to be around that standard range. They're just regular folks trying to survive in a galaxy full of horrors, and many never see anything bigger than the occasional Ogren or Space Marine. At number 17 is Commissar Sebastian Yarrick. Known as Old Baelai, Yarrick earned his reputation fighting against the orcs and basically refusing to die. He was famous for his mechanical eye taken from an orc, his unwavering discipline, and his ability to inspire troops even in the darkest of circumstances. Yarrick stood right around 6 feet tall, which is a decent height for a man of the Astra Militarum, but not at all unusual on its own. Being ordinary in size, but massive in courage is how Yarrick rolled. Next, at number 16 are the Catachan Jungle Fighters. Everybody knows Catachans are basically the Imperium's version of super buff action heroes. They hail from a death world with various flora and fauna that would love to eat them for lunch. The result is an entire culture that's adept at surviving the deadliest conditions nature can throw out. Because of this harsh environment, they're on average a bit taller and a lot more muscular than the typical human soldier, often reaching about 6.5 feet in height. Sliding into number 15 are the Skitarii Tech Guard. The Skitarii are soldiers of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and while they might have once been standard humans, they've gone through a boatload of augmentations, from bionic limbs to artificially reinforced spines. On average, these enhancements can push them to around 6.5 feet as well, but with an intimidating presence that makes them feel even taller. A lot of times, their legs might be replaced with mechanical stilts, or their torsos braced with machine plating so that they appear lean and menacing. At number 14 come the Firstborn Space Marines. These are the classic Adeptus Astartes that have been around in the lore for decades. Superhuman warriors created on the Emperor's genius. They typically stand 7 to 7.5 feet tall out in their armor. In their Mark 7 or Mark 8 power armor, they can appear even larger, overshadowing regular humans. Their genetic enhancements, known as the Gene Seed, plus a series of brutal surgeries, push them into that size category. They also come with redundant organs, enhanced reflexes, and the ability to shrug off injuries that would kill a normal man. Number 13 are the Prismarchs Marines. These new generation Astartes were developed by Archmagos Belisarius Cull during that whole business with the Ultima founding. They're bigger, stronger, and slightly more advanced on the genetic side than the Firstborn, standing at about 8 feet tall, often even more in full armor. This additional height is matched by an improvement in raw power, stability, and a suite of new organs that bolster their resilience in combat. Moving to number 12, Beastmen. Although many beastmen are corrupted by chaos, there are some that manage to exist under the Imperium's domain, or at least haven't fully embraced the ruinous powers. They're a weird halfway mix between humans and various animal traits like horns, hooves, or fur. The larger ones can easily reach 8 to 10 feet in height, making them physically imposing in combat. At number 11 are the ogrins. They're a recognized abhuman strain used extensively by the Astra Militarum as close combat specialists. Ogrins are enormous with thick bones and muscle mass that let them shrug off wounds and break an enemy's back with a single blow. They can reach anywhere between 8 and 10 feet, though a few especially large ones might exceed that. At number 10 are the Adeptus Custodes, the personal bodyguards of the Emperor. Often described as the peak of genetic and martial excellence, they surpass even the Space Marines in skill and dedication. A typical custodian can stand anywhere from around 9 to 10 feet tall, clad in shining golden armor and carrying some of the most advanced weapons in the Imperium. They're basically living legends. At number 9 comes Alfarius and Omegon, the twin Primarchs of the Alpha Legion. They're typically shorter than the shortest Primarchs, but the shortest is relative here. They're still huge compared to standard humans. Sources usually put them around 9 to 10 feet. Because the Alpha Legion operates on secrecy and infiltration, Alfarius and Omegon can blend into their own ranks by pretending to be one of their especially tall legionnaires, thus sowing confusion about who's who. Number 8 goes to House Goliath from the Necromunda Underhive. The Goliaths are known for their love of genetic engineering, steroidal augmentation, and a culture of extreme physicality. As a result, many of them can reach up to about 10 feet. Their entire identity is built around forging unstoppable warriors who excel at feats of brute force, whether that's dominating the fighting pits or controlling territory in the Underhive. They're not exactly subtle, but if something needs to be physically overpowered, the Goliaths are more than ready to throw their weight around. At number 7 is Alexis Pollux, the legendary Imperial Fists captain, sometimes called the Crimson Fist for the way he took leadership in the Crimson Flats chapter. Pollux was noted to be exceptionally tall even among Astartes, stated to be around 10 feet without power armor, meaning he could stand eye to eye with a custodian. He was so strong that it's reported he could end other Space Marines with a single punch. At number 6 is Constantine Valador. He was the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes back in the Emperor's Great Crusade days. Valador was famously even taller than other custodians and is said to be able to stand face to face with some Primarchs. That likely puts him around 10 or 11 feet or somewhere in that range. He was a master of war in all respects, reputed to have speed, reflexes, and martial technique that few could hope to match. Number 5 belongs to most of the Primarchs. Usually a Primarch's height is pegged at somewhere between 10 and 11 feet, though many fans debate whether some of them might be taller. Artwork and novels vary, with a few authors portraying them as even bigger. On the lower end, you have Alfarius and Omegon. On the higher end, you have behemoths like Vulcan, who is widely regarded as the physically largest. At number 4 is Tyberos, also known as the Red Wake. He's the chapter master of the Carcharodons, or Space Sharks, a savage and mysterious chapter that often appears from the void to eliminate threats. Tyberos is said to be about the size of a Primarch, standing around 10 or 11 feet when out of Terminator armor. In that Terminator suit, he's a hulking mass of murder that can tear through other Space Marines with his signature chain weapon gauntlets. He rarely speaks, letting his devastating combat style do the talking. Number 3 is Archmagos Belisarius Cawl, who's been kicking around for thousands of years, constantly upgrading himself with mechanical limbs, extra appendages, and elaborate servo rigs. Technically, he's still human in some sense, but he's so augmented that it can be hard to tell where the flesh ends and the metal begins. Cawl can be huge, sometimes described as around 12 feet, because he chooses forms that tower over normal tech priests. He's been known to refer to Primaris Marines as his little soldiers, which indicates he's physically bigger than them, or at least the mechanical exoskeleton he's using is. At number 2 is Vulcan, the Primarch of the Salamander's Legion and the largest of the Emperor's demigod sons. Many put him at more than 12 feet, sometimes depicted as towering even over other Primarchs in his power armor. He's known as an incredible strength that goes beyond normal Primarch levels, and legend has it he can flip tanks with his bare hands. As if that weren't enough, Vulcan is also perpetually wreathed in flame imagery thanks to Salamander's affinity for fire and forging. Finally, at number 1 is the Emperor of Mankind himself. The Emperor is generally cited as standing around 14 feet, and some claim he might be even taller, depending on how much psychic might he's channeling or what kind of golden armor he's wearing. In any case, he's definitely bigger than any Primarch. Although the Emperor is currently entombed on the Golden Throne, his legend looms so large over the Imperium that it's hard to separate fact from myth. But just about everyone agrees that in terms of raw physical scale among humans, the Emperor takes the top spot. So there you have it, the 20 tallest humans in Warhammer 40K. Some are big in literal size, others are average but can carry themselves like giants. Hopefully this stroll through the extremes of human heights in the Imperium has been fun. If it was, hitting that like button would be a huge help. Thanks!